Some families don't need to raise their voices to show you exactly how little they think of outsiders. The Hawthorne family had mastered the softer, more insidious version of cruelty, polite humiliation wrapped in tradition, delivered with a smile sharp enough to cut. From the moment Emma and I stepped into their estate that Thanksgiving night, I sensed how the evening would unfold. The chandelier glowed softly over the foyer, illuminating every polished surface and magnifying every cold glance. Emma walked in with a box of pastries she had baked herself, cheeks pink from the wind, kindness radiating from her expression. My mother, Regina Hawthorne, accepted the pastries with a delicate pinch of her fingers, the same way she handled anything she silently judged unworthy. Her eyes lingered on Emma not with curiosity, but with evaluation, as though she were trying to decide if this guest qualified to breathe the same air. Mason, my brother, stood lazily beside the living room archway, swirling a glass of Cabernet with theatrical flair. "So this is Emma," he said without moving to greet her, his smirk hinting at a game he already expected to win. "Hope she's ready. We have a tradition." Emma gave a polite smile, unaware that tradition in this household had never been about culture. It was about power. Julia followed behind him carrying a long wooden tray lined with 9 miniature glasses filled with different alcohols. The array looked elegant, curated, almost artistic. Something you'd expect in a professional tasting room. But the speed with which Julia placed the tray on the center table revealed an eagerness that felt too predatory to hide. "Everyone who enters our family participates," she chirped. Regina nodded in agreement. "We value palate, composure, and grace here." The words sounded beautiful, but the intent behind them was anything but. Emma sat politely in the armchair beneath the chandelier, unaware that this was a staging choice. The brightest light in the room, the most visible angle, the perfect place for judgment to nest. Julia handed her the first glass, a dry red with aggressive tannins. Emma took a sip, thanked her, and tried to remain gracious. Immediately, the second glass was placed in her hand, a harsh white with sharp acidity. No pause. No space to breathe. Then the third, a syrupy dessert wine. The fourth, an artificial peach cocktail. The fifth, a burning rum. The sixth, an amber whiskey. The seventh, an overly floral boutique wine. The eighth, something so sharp that even standing beside her, I felt it sting my own senses. Emma's cheeks warmed from the rapid assault, not drunkenness. She stayed composed, her posture steady, even as the pressure built around her. Mason watched her with smug amusement. Julia's smile grew thinner, colder. Regina observed like a scientist monitoring a specimen. And then came the 9th glass, the Hawthorne homemade liquor. Brutal. Burning. A rite of passage the family had invented decades ago to separate the refined from the unrefined. I had been given 5 glasses during my own initiation. Emma now faced nearly double that number, poured back to back without mercy. She lifted the final glass with a tremor she tried to hide. Regina saw it immediately. "No spitting," she said softly. "Swallow. Otherwise it's disrespectful." Mason chuckled. "If she can't handle this, that's not a good sign." Emma looked at me, still polite, still trying, but her eyes said everything. She didn't want to disappoint me, yet she knew she was being cornered. Before she could force herself to drink something no guest should ever be pressured to swallow, I stepped forward, placed my hand over hers and said in a calm, unwavering tone, "That's enough." The room froze as though someone had unplugged the air. Regina's gaze sharpened. "Lucas," she said slowly, "you are interrupting a family tradition." I held her stare. "This is not tradition. It's humiliation dressed up as one." Mason scoffed. Julia stiffened. Emma's hand trembled under mine, not from alcohol, but from holding herself together for far too long. I helped her stand, positioning myself between her and the tray of glasses. Regina stepped forward as if to block our exit. "No one leaves during a family ritual," she declared. My response came out steady, colder than I intended. "We just did." And without another word, I walked Emma through the foyer and out the front door, leaving behind their chandelier, their rituals, and the version of myself they had conditioned into compliance. The cold night air felt sharp and clean as the door shut behind us, sealing the first crack in a boundary I should have drawn years ago. The moment the estate disappeared behind us, swallowed by the long private driveway and the shadows of the towering pines, I felt something in my chest loosen, a tension I hadn't realized I'd carried since the moment we stepped inside. Emma leaned her forehead lightly against the cool window, her breathing even but tired, grounding herself in the quiet that finally belonged to us. The faint flush on her cheeks was still there, but her eyes, no longer forced to perform composure under a chandelier, held a calm steadiness that told me she wasn't fragile at all. She had simply been pushed past any reasonable limit. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was a reprieve, the first real breath either of us had taken all night. I pulled into a small rest stop glowing with cold fluorescent lights. Emma went to the restroom to wash her face while I stood beside the vending machine, staring at my reflection in the glass. The version of me staring back didn't look shocked. He looked awakened. I realized that the moment Emma reached for that 9th glass, a drink meant to scorch the throat and shred dignity, I had finally confronted something I'd avoided for years. My family's behavior wasn't eccentricity or old-fashioned pride. It was cruelty wrapped in etiquette. When Emma returned, hair damp and expression clearer, she offered me a small, apologetic smile. "You didn't have to stand up for me." My chest tightened, not out of guilt, but out of frustration that she felt she needed to apologize after everything she'd endured. "I didn't stand up for you," I said softly. "I told them the truth." She held my gaze, reassessing me with quiet trust before giving a small nod. Back at the car, the trunk was still open from earlier, revealing the carefully wrapped gifts I had brought. The rare wine for Regina, the custom knife set for my father, the cashmere scarf for Julia, the toy set for Mason's son. Items I'd selected thoughtfully, each one chosen with the hope of creating a moment of connection that, deep down, I knew my family would never reciprocate. Seeing them now felt surreal, as though they belonged to a different version of the evening entirely. "They don't deserve these," I murmured, closing the trunk with a soft but final thud. Emma didn't argue. She didn't offer unrealistic optimism. She simply stood beside me, steady, grounded, offering the kind of support that came without pressure or expectation. It was the quietest kind of loyalty, and it struck me deeper than anything said inside that estate. As we drove back onto the highway, my phone erupted with notifications. Regina. Mason. Julia. Message after message, call after call. Each vibration felt predictable enough that I didn't need to read any of them. My family had a pattern. First insisting everything was harmless, then accusing the person who objected, then rewriting reality to protect their pride. Emma watched the phone light up repeatedly but didn't comment. She simply looked out the window, letting the city lights smear into soft streaks of yellow and blue. Her posture gradually eased, the tension in her shoulders softening as the miles widened the distance between us and the estate. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but certain. "They're going to blame me, aren't they?" I gripped the steering wheel lightly and answered, "They'll blame anyone but themselves." The truth settled over us, not heavy but clear. This wasn't about a ruined evening. It was about a history I had allowed to stay unresolved for too long. Emma didn't force me to choose sides. She didn't ask me to fight. But the decision had already formed in me the moment I saw her trying to swallow humiliation disguised as tradition. She deserved better. And for the first time I realized I did too. The highway straightened ahead, lines stretching into calm darkness, and with each passing minute the weight of my family's expectations slipped further away. Emma turned toward me with a soft expression, tired but trusting. In that quiet car, moving steadily away from everything that had suffocated us earlier, I understood something simple and undeniable. I wasn't afraid of their anger anymore. And I wasn't going back. The farther we drove from the Hawthorne estate, the more the night opened up around us, wide and quiet like a place where nothing demanded perfection. Emma sat with her hands clasped loosely in her lap, her posture finally relaxed, her breathing steadying as the world outside shifted from private forest roads to open stretches of highway. The faint glow from passing streetlights washed over her features, softening the tension she'd carried through the entire evening. I watched her from the corner of my eye, not to monitor her but to confirm what I already knew. She wasn't unraveling. She was simply recalibrating after hours of being scrutinized. She had walked into a place designed to test her dignity, and she had walked out without letting them take it from her. That realization settled in me like a calm certainty. We stopped at a nearly empty gas station on the outskirts of town, more for the symbolism than necessity. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Emma rinsed her mouth, splashing cool water on her face. I leaned against the cold metal rack of snack shelves, staring at the truck stop's reflection in the window. For years, I had accepted my family's behavior because it was familiar. Tonight, seeing Emma endure their tradition, I understood the pattern with painful clarity. The Hawthorns didn't test people to include them, they tested them to assert control. Emma returned with her hair tucked behind her ear, her expression clearer now. She didn't force a smile, she didn't pretend she was fine, she simply breathed easier. "I didn't want to cause a scene," she said quietly. "You didn't," I replied. They did. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. We walked back to the car, and the moment I saw my phone on the dashboard, still lighting up with messages, I knew exactly which stage of the Hawthorne family cycle we had entered. First denial, then indignation, then rewriting the narrative to blame the one who refused to comply. I ignored the notifications and focused on Emma instead. She settled into her seat with her seatbelt clicking softly, and for a moment, we simply existed in a shared quiet. I started the engine, and the soft rumble filled the space between us, grounding the moment. "They're going to say I overreacted," Emma murmured. "No," I said calmly. "They're going to say we overreacted. Because that's easier than admitting they were cruel." Her lips pressed together, not hurt but recognition. Back on the road, the city skyline finally appeared in the distance, glowing like a promise of normalcy. Emma leaned her head back, the fatigue settling into her shoulders, but her dignity fully intact. Every mile we put between us and the estate felt like peeling off another layer of expectation they had pressed onto me for years. It occurred to me that this was the first time I had ever left the Hawthorne home by choice, not obligation. And the strange part was how natural it felt. Emma watched the lights shifting ahead, her voice soft when she finally spoke. "Do you think they'll understand?" she asked. I shook my head. "They don't understand. They adjust. They rewrite. They blame. Understanding isn't part of their system." She absorbed that without protest, as though she had already sensed the truth the moment Regina tightened her grip on those 9 glasses. By the time we reached the city limits, the tension that had clung to both of us inside the Hawthorne estate had thinned into something manageable. Emma reached over and brushed her fingers lightly against mine, a small, grounding gesture, not seeking reassurance but offering connection. I glanced at her briefly and saw the calm determination in her eyes. She wasn't shaken. She wasn't broken. She was choosing peace over pride. And as I drove the final stretch into the warm glow of the city, I realized Emma hadn't just endured my family's cruelty. She had revealed the truth I needed to face. Once you see a pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. And tonight, I had seen the Hawthorne family without the filter of tradition, privilege, or loyalty, just people willing to humiliate someone gentle to preserve their illusion of superiority. And as the road led us home, one thing became certain. I was done protecting that illusion. When we finally stepped into our apartment, the warmth of the living room enveloped us instantly, a stark contrast to the sterile arrogance of the Hawthorne estate. Emma sat on the edge of the sofa, hands lightly folded, her breathing soft but steady. I placed my keys on the counter, letting the familiar comfort of home settle around us like a blanket. My phone buzzed again on the table, relentless, vibrating with messages and missed calls. I didn't touch it. Emma's eyes followed the screen for a moment before returning to me. "Do you want to see what they said?" she asked. Her tone wasn't pushing, it was understanding. "Not yet," I replied. "Right now, I want to breathe without them hovering." She nodded, offering the kind of quiet empathy that didn't demand resolution. When I finally opened the messages, they were exactly what I expected. Regina insisted nothing had been wrong. Mason claimed Emma had been rude by hesitating. Julia wrote that everyone does the tasting, and accused us of dramatizing a harmless rite. Not one message acknowledged Emma's discomfort. Not one message addressed the pressure. It was all about appearances, control, and tradition. I typed one clear message in response. Forcing someone to swallow 9 types of alcohol isn't tradition. It's disrespect. We're not coming back until you understand that. I hit send without hesitation. More messages followed, guilt, accusations, disappointment. I set my phone face down. Emma walked into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. When she handed one to me, her expression softened with something I recognized instantly, not relief, not gratitude, but partnership. "Let's drink something that's actually our choice," she said calmly. I felt a quiet, steady warmth settle in my chest. We sat together on the sofa, sipping water in silence, and it felt more meaningful than any toast with my family's imported wines ever had. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing the role of the dutiful son. I was choosing the life I wanted. Over the next few days, the messages continued. Regina demanded an apology. Mason suggested Emma was manipulating me. Julia insisted the family was hurt by our disrespect. I read them with a clarity I had never possessed before. Their words no longer carried authority, only repetition. Emma watched me handle each ping with a quiet understanding, occasionally asking if I was okay but never pushing her own opinion. It struck me how different she was from them, not because she was gentle but because she didn't need control to feel secure. One evening while preparing dinner together, Emma paused while seasoning the chicken. "You know this might not blow over, right?" she said gently. "I know," I replied. "But maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe the version of family I thought I had was never real." She searched my expression for hesitation but found none. That realization seemed to settle something in her too, like she finally understood she wasn't standing between me and my family. She was standing beside me while I stepped out of something toxic. Later that night, after we ate, I turned off my phone completely. Not out of avoidance but out of choice. The room felt quiet in a peaceful way, not empty, not tense, just ours. Emma curled up beside me, resting her head on my shoulder, and the simplicity of it felt like a revelation. There was no test to pass, no performance to maintain, no standards to meet. Just warmth. Just presence. Just life. In that silence I realized something profound. Family doesn't get to define who you become. They only get to influence you until you recognize the difference between loyalty and submission. That night, with Emma beside me and the Hawthorne estate miles behind, I understood that I hadn't abandoned my family. I had simply stopped abandoning myself.